I'm Ian Williams, a trustee for the Griffin Poetry Prize. I'm speaking with American poet Ocean Vuong, author of Time is a Mother, published by Penguin, and a finalist for the 2023 Griffin Poetry Prize. Hi, Ocean.
Hi, Ian. Thank you so much for talking. Glad to be here.
Well, in a few sentences, this is always a bit tricky for poets. In a few sentences, how would you describe this collection?
Uh-oh, Lord. Uh, I think it's an attempt to expand and make felt personal grief as a lens to national and historic grief. And I think
Hmm.
I'll keep it as short as I can because usually I tend to go on in paragraphs, but I'll start there. That's the
Right. And so it's tethered to the autobiographical, right? To the real death of the real life death of your mother, as strange as that sounds. Um, how firmly, Ocean, do you insist on the separation between author and speaker? Like, how much will you admit the autobiographical?
I think the autobiographical happens with or without our admittance of it. And for me, I'm most interested in perhaps Wallace Stevens' sort of
Mm,
credo of the supreme fiction. And what he
mm,
means by that is that, what happens when literature moves beyond memoiristic transcription into a sort of taking autobiography literally, which means the writing of the self, right? So that self to me also includes an interiority that might be
mm,
scrutable to me, obscure
mm,
from me, a personhood, a strangeness. And so literature, the poem makes that evident beyond a sort of narrative of the transcription of memoir or lived experience. Like it's funny because I look back at my poems, even in this book, and I say,
mm,
how much of this have I lived? Have I
mm,
been a dinosaur? Have
mm,
I can't drive, but there's a poem about driving and crashing a car. So that's more of a nightmare than a memoir.
mm,
So I think for me, I take on the project for me with the poem and in novels is what is true in my lived experience that I can transform into the
mm,
fictive. And the fictive is
mm,
where everything could be charged. That's where literature begins for me. It's where the
mm.
imagination has to say, now what? What do I not know?
Right. Yeah, so that's the promise of the autobiographical, right? That it can turn into something fictive, or it can sort
Yeah.
of allow our imaginations to flood in. What's the pitfall then? I mean, the pitfall is probably obvious if you teach, right?
The pitfalls of that project is staying the problem of writing what you know. I mean, everyone says that, and that's a good place to start, and maybe that's why
Mm,
many writers began in a very memoiristic bent. But I think that you immediately start hitting the same walls of going back to familiar ground, and familiar ground when you're starting out is very rich. It's like rich, a vitamin, abundant soil. But
mm,
ask any farmer, and they'll tell you that if you keep planting in the same crop in the same place, that soil is going to be depleted very quickly. And so
right.
that one of the limitations is you start to repeat yourself towards
Mm,
redundancy. I do, however, believe that you can return to a theme, that themes are inexhaustible as long as your tools are new, and the way you look at something, you approach it from a different
mm, mm. But that soil needs rest every once in a while, right? To recover its nutrients. Um, Ocean, I think to my mind, one of your big contributions to contemporary literature is your recovery of beauty and gorgeousness, these kinds of abstractions that for a long time have been sort of discouraged. Um, why is it important for you to take note of the beautiful, to render it simply as the beautiful, without always pushing towards a more specific description?
way. Mm.
What is it about the gorgeous and the beautiful that you want to leave in that state rather than in a more described state?
Well, I think the idea of gorgeousness, particularly in queer communities, seems to be the remedy to mid-century modernisms, particularly European mid-century modernisms, ideal of celebrating the austere
Right.
skepticism, right, of beauty, that beauty is
Mm.
merely decorous, that in the age of modern warfare, anything decorous and beautiful is suspect, right? And this
Mhm.
is one of the modernism's, biggest promise in art after World War I is that now everything will be sobering and clear. And we move towards a desire for historic nonfiction as something closer to truth. And this is where we get this myth that fiction and poetry is for the feminine, right?
Mm.
I've met people who tell me that only women should read fiction, that nonfiction is for serious, clear-headed men, right?
I've heard that too. Yeah.
Ridiculous, but all that came from the early 20th century. And I think for me, we haven't had a clear rebuttal of that until the queer movement of the 60s and 70s, 80s, and now again. So the celebration of beauty as medicinal, not
Mm.
merely decorous or not merely for an aesthetic purpose, but for something organically purposeful for one's livelihood and the wealth of life.
Mm.
That seemingly radical, but at the same time very ancient.
Mm.
We move in circles as we do, but so for me, I lean on that sort of pedagogy of beauty as something not only functional, but enriching, and should be merely suspect.
Mhm. Yeah. And so here's the thing number two that really I admire about your work. And that is the kind of intimacy of the lyric that you don't back away from. I think when I read you, I feel like I'm on a long drive in a car in the dark, in the rain, with the radio. And when the DJ feels like he's speaking just to you, there's something about your work where it feels like I'm only with Ocean and Ocean is only with me. How do you conceive of your relation to the reader? And I don't mean like who is your imagined reader. I mean like what is your relationship to us? Are you the guiding parent? Are you the DJ? Are you the friend? How do you think of us as you're writing?
Well, that's a lovely metaphor, I think, and that's actually very true. I'm actually very proud to hear you say that it sounds like someone on the radio in a car, in the back seat. That's my experience because I can never drive. I'm never in the driver's seat. Um, but I always say that I have the utmost respect for any reader, particularly my readers. But to respect your readers is to ignore them,
Mm.
to not assume that their intelligence, their understanding of poetry, their grappling with literary tradition, historic traditions, where they are, who they are, uh, the class systems. I think the greatest respect is to pull back and focus on the language and knowing that language as a communal technology will be met, right? It is a conductor. The page is a conductor, and the language, the sentence makes that meeting happen. And I just have trust in that. And the minute I turn away from that and start guessing or imposing my position, what I should be, and also I think I should be something completely different for every reader, but also for every poem. I should change too.
Mm. Mm.
As readers change, I should change. It's actually an obligation for the writer to transform as much as they transform as a person. And so
Mm.
I try to ignore the fact that a reader will be there. I don't assume any reader will come. But when that happens, I'm free to kind of follow the wordplay and experiment with the work. And so in that way, the reader is evacuated. So it does feel like I'm speaking into the void, into some sort of, transmission
Mhm.
already out there. And I think that's kind of how I start, metaphorically, how I start my poem is kind of tapping the microphone. It's like, hello,
Mm.
You know, anyone out
Right.
there? It feels post-apocalyptic in many ways, but
Right.
I'm a poet. I can't help it.
Right.
Yeah.
I really love that. I really love that, Ocean. So we should probably wrap up here, but I do want to ask you another question here, and that's about the poem "Amazon History of a Former Nail Salon Worker." Your mother, presumably. And in that poem, just like a quick description, you uh, go through an Amazon search history and you just list the objects that were bought by month over maybe an 18-month period or so. Um, and it's a kind of stunning, right? Because we get a lot of information about the shape of this person's life in those 18 months. Do you really think that we can be known by the objects in our lives? This is like the modernist project from earlier. Should we be taking inventories for objects in order to learn about ourselves? Like, what can we know about ourselves from the objects in our lives?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think it's self-evident, and
Mm,
you know, Amazon being sort of this modern capital sort of logging of time, right?
mm,
And that the debris of our living says a lot about who we are. And I think
mm,
especially for a mother and a woman to curate her own life through the objects she acquires, both for herself and for her family. It becomes, again, very ancient. You know, mothers since time infinitum has been going to markets and acquiring things for use. And so to me, the poem is about how use traffics through time and then how information can gather into meaning. So there's
mm,
information that sort of gets galvanized and compounds into meaning through proximity and the duration. The duration is very important. I was interested in, you know, I spent 15 years training to be a lyricist, and then arriving at a point where I removed all lyricism, all maneuvers, no metaphors, there's not even a
yeah,
sentence. There's no
right.
sentence. The only poem I've ever written that has no sentences, and it's just a list. And I think it was important for me to kind of use William Carlos Williams' credos: no ideas but in things, right?
Mm,
So that the thing is the idea, and then we are given the idea through the corporate language that sells these products, right? And then
mm,
and how that corresponds with a kind of personhood, because a list of acquisitions, whether it's Amazon or a personal list,
mm,
is also a biography. This is,
mm,
it's a biography of desire, which is the
right.
thing so central to being a person. What do I want?
Mm,
What do I need?
right. So lovely. That phrase, you should write this down, your own phrase, the debris of our lives.
Hmm.
No, just really, really, that's it, right? That's the alternate title to that poem.
That's the title of my next book. There you go. I'll quote you.
The debris of our lives. On Earth, we're briefly gorgeous. The debris of our lives.
The final
um,
chapter. Yeah.
Ocean, I would love it if you would share a poem with us to wrap up.
Okay, great. Speaking of list poems, this is another list poem that
Mm,
comes absolutely from found language. It's a
mm,
sonnet, and it comes through the lexicon of violence that we use to celebrate each other, and it's just one phrase stacked over another. It's called Old Glory, which of course is the nickname of our American flag. Knock 'em dead, big guy. Go in there, guns blazing, buddy. You crushed at the show. No, it was a blowout. No, a massacre. Total overkill. We tore them a new one. My son's a beast, a lady killer, straight shooter. He knocked her up, a bombshell blonde. You'll blow them away. Let's bag the broad. Let's spit roast the faggot. Let's fuck his brains out. That girl's a grenade. It was like Nam down there. I'd still slam it though. I'd smash it good. I'm cracking up. It's hilarious. You truly murdered. You had me dying over here. Bro, for real though, I'm dead.
Just brilliant. Thank you, Ocean. I feel like we have a lot more to talk about.
Oh,
But for the purposes of this, thank you. I've been speaking with Ocean Vuong, author of Time as a Mother and a finalist for the 2023 Griffin Poetry Prize.
thank you, Ian.